The Minnesota Vikings entered the 2023 regular season looking to improve upon how they finished in 2022, which was a home loss to the Giants in the wild card round of the playoffs. Unfortunately, they started the year with a 1-4 record just 9 months after they finished the 2022 regular season with a 13-4 record and had 4 one-score losses in the first 5 games. It was the polar opposite of 2022, in which this team would go 11-0 in one-score games, and finally, when the Vikings were starting to get some momentum and build a winning streak, along with Kirk Cousins playing some of the best football of his career, the unthinkable happened and Kirk tore his Achilles in a victory over the Green Bay Packers back in Week 8. The Vikings would acquire quarterback Josh Dobbs before the trade deadline and go on to win the next 2 games and be 6-4 through the first 10 games of the year. But the music stopped there and they would go on to lose 5 of their next 6 games, with their only win in the span being a 3-0 win over the Raiders in Week 14. They are 7-9 and the Detroit Lions are playing their starters in Week 18, so I think it is reasonable to assume the Vikings will lose that game, which would have them finish at 7-10 and be left in a very difficult situation entering the offseason. But what should this team do moving forward? Well, we are going to try and answer that in today's video. Now let's begin. We are starting today's video by looking at what options the Minnesota Vikings have moving forward at the quarterback position, and the first, of course, is Kirk Cousins. In the 8 games Kirk played in 2023, he threw for over 2,300 yards and 18 touchdowns, and with the Vikings' run game, or really lack thereof, it wasn't unreasonable to think Kirk could have thrown for 5,000 yards in 17 games this year. In fact, based on his numbers in the 8 games he played, he was on pace for 4,953 yards, 38 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, which is damn near MVP caliber numbers. I don't think he would have won it over Lamar, of course, but the point is, Kirk was having a tremendous year, and the quarterback play since he has left isn't just notable, it's completely season-altering. Since Kirk has gone down, the 3 horsemen the Vikings have trotted out at the position in Jaren Hall, Josh Dobbs, and Nick Mullins have combined for 10 passing touchdowns to 12 interceptions, and the team has went just 3-5 since Kirk went down. Aside from the Dobbs magic, which lasted a grand total of a game and a half, the Vikings offense has been bad for the most part. Not only has it been bad, but it's been littered with turnovers, and in the past 6 games, the Minnesota Vikings have turned the ball over 15 times, which is obviously not a recipe for winning football. But they have more than a quarterback situation on their hands. They also have a problem, isn't the right word because there's a negative connotation with that word, but they have a pending situation on their hands, and it involves paying star receiver Justin Jefferson. The decision to pay Jefferson is obvious, but JJ has said numerous times that he's interested in winning and that the money will come, but that first and foremost, he is interested in winning. This all plays into the Vikings having quite the situation on their hands, because they have to think about competing not just now, but in the future too, as they obviously want to keep their best player on the team around for the next several years. The goal should be to ensure Justin Jefferson retires a Viking, but this leaves the Vikings really one of 2, maybe 3 options this offseason, and this could be 2 depending how you look at it, but we will discuss all 3. The first, of course, is to bring back Kirk on a deal something in the 2-year, $100 million area, and that may seem like a lot, but that's the going rate of a high-level quarterback, and if Kirk has shown anything throughout his career, it's that he is a businessman and will be compensated. What will hurt the Vikings this time around negotiating with Kirk is there's a lot of teams that think they are a quarterback away from seriously competing, like the Atlanta Falcons and like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who each would have won at least 2 or 3 more games this year had a healthy Kirk been under center for them. What will also hurt the Vikings in negotiations is Atlanta is close to entering desperation mode with head coach Arthur Smith, as he will undoubtedly be on the hot seat entering the 2024 season. They have also said his job is safe and that he will return next year, and Kirk would certainly help that team out in a big way. I don't think there's anybody that would deny Kirk wants to stay in Minnesota, given the relationship he has with the community and with how much the fan base loves him, and how some of the fan base realizes they took him for granted after he went down, but Kirk loves Minnesota and that much is clear. But a $20 million difference can be the difference between him staying and leaving. Daniel Jones got $40 million per year last offseason, and even coming off the injury, there is no doubt Kirk will get at least that. Option 2 here is drafting a quarterback in the 2024 draft in the first round, and the Vikings currently have the number 12 overall pick. If some other teams win and they lose to Detroit in Week 18, they can potentially move up into the top 10. That would be ideal because they are going to have to move up to get a quarterback, whether it be Jaden Daniels from LSU or Michael Penix from Washington. This is, of course, assuming Caleb Williams, Drake May go a combination of 1-2, and that Minnesota will not have a chance to go get either of those guys. I'm guessing the cost would be at least 2 first-round picks, if not 3, to go get their guy of the future and hope he pans out. There, of course, is option 3, which is really the same as option 2, where you go get your quarterback of the future in the first round, but you give Kirk a 2-year deal and have him play those 2 years, then move on to the next quarterback. But within this, you almost have to talk to Justin and see how he feels about the entire situation. This also isn't to say whatever Justin says goes and that we are letting a 24-year-old receiver make decisions for the entire franchise regardless of how anyone feels, but his input here is key. Minnesota reporters have been asking about the situation, and it is clear JJ wants Kirk back. He was asked on January 3rd about this, and he said, quote, "It's not really in my control. If it's Kirk, perfect. If it's whoever they choose, it's not my decision," end quote. Obviously, Kirk isn't going to play forever, and given Justin is 24, he will have an NFL career post Kirk Cousins. But aside from the quarterback situation, there's some problems with this team, and that were more than evident even when Kirk was healthy and under center. The Vikings legitimately cannot run the football, and in the 8 games Kirk played for Minnesota in 2023, they ran for 100 yards or more as a team just twice, which were against the Panthers and Chargers, both teams that will finish with top 7 draft picks. Running back Ty Chandler had a good game against the Bengals, but aside from that, and a few games where Josh Dobbs sparked the rushing yards for the Vikings, this team has very little run game, and that's going to continue to be a problem in 2024, not just because of the lack of running backs available, but because the interior offensive line isn't great for this team either. The interior offensive line at the moment from left to right is Dalton Reisner, Garrett Bradbury, and Ned Ingram, and none of these guys are particularly good, at least run blocking wise, and they're also light relative to interior offensive line standards. Reisner is listed at the heaviest at 312, and disregarding Kirk or whoever the next quarterback may be for a second, if they opt to not go the Kirk route, this will not just be a problem for the Vikings, but for a lot of other teams for that matter too, because the running back draft class isn't good this year, and the free agency class is guys that are on the decline, like Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, and Tony Pollard, for example. I specifically left Saquon Barkley out of this simply because the Vikings will not have the money to be able to pay him. Not only that, but the defense has taken a step back recently and has allowed 27 or more points in each of the last 3 games and has looked a lot different than what we saw at times earlier this year. Harrison Smith, of course, won't play forever, and we have seen Josh Metellus step up in a big way in 2023, but I think there are a lot of holes on this roster with very limited resources to work with. I know people love to dog GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah about his first draft, as admittedly it is pretty bad, and having Kyle Hamilton would help at the moment, but outside of Danielle Hunter, this team has no viable second option, and Marcus Davenport was a huge bust as a free agent signing, as Harrison Smith, a safety at 34 years old, would go on to have more pressures and sacks than Marcus in his lone season with the team. Meaning the Vikings will enter the 2024 offseason with needs at quarterback, pass rush, interior offensive line, and running back, and obviously they only have 1 first-round pick. Yes, you can get a good pass rusher on day 2 of the draft, but one thing that has to be factored into the Vikings offseason and plans for that matter is that second-round pick could be allocated in a trade to go up and get a quarterback in the future. I think there is too much talent on this roster with guys like Jefferson, Hockenson, of course, when he comes back from the torn ACL, and plenty others for that matter, but taking the next step for this franchise is going to be very, very difficult. We all knew entering the year that the percent chance they had back-to-back 13-win seasons was always going to be low, especially for the crowd that loved calling them frauds during the 2022 season, but this offseason is not only going to be critical for their future, but it's also going to be incredibly difficult because they don't have even close to as many resources as other NFL teams to work with. It should also be noted their 2024 third-round pick is in the hands of the Lions due to the TJ Hockenson trade. The Vikings currently have 7 draft picks, which are on the screen, and they will have a lot of holes to fill. There is a part of the Vikings fan base that acknowledges how many holes there are to fill and proposes the trade of Justin Jefferson to acquire as many first-round picks as possible and giving the team as many chances as they can to fill those said holes. Again, that's a part of the Vikings fan base and not myself, and a big reason why I am against this is JJ is a one-of-one player. This team had a one-of-one player 20 years ago by the name of Randy Moss and traded him, and it didn't work out at all. Not to say it would be the exact same result and that you can't make a trade 20 years later because of it, but if you are given, we'll say 2 first-round picks, one of those immediately would be spent on a receiver in hopes he could become anything close to what Jefferson is now, similar to how they drafted Jefferson after they traded Stephon Diggs. But you don't often get struck by lightning twice, and another example of this actually came in the same draft as Jefferson when the 49ers tried to apply the same concept. They traded DeForest Buckner to the Colts for their first-round pick, which was used on Javon Kinlaw. Kinlaw's pro comp coming out of South Carolina was Defo, and lifetime Kinlaw has 60 career pressures in one of the most friendly situations you will ever have as a defensive lineman. We are referring to all of the good pass rushers around him on the 49ers defensive line, and he's still not a great player. Buckner, on the other hand, has had more sacks in every season since then than Kinlaw has in his entire career. All of this to say, if you are the Vikings building towards tomorrow, it is simple. You do whatever you have to do to extend Justin Jefferson, extend Kirk Cousins for another year or two, and try and trade up to get your quarterback of the future this year. I don't want this to come across like the Vikings are anywhere close to as successful as the 49ers, because ultimately they're not, but the situation specifically reminds me of the 49ers in 2021, where they knew they were picking a lot higher than anticipated because of injury, and that's going to be the Vikings in the 2024 draft. Sure, Minnesota isn't a Super Bowl contender year in and year out, but they had 4 losses down the stretch by a combined 12 points that I do think is completely reasonable to say. If Kirk Cousins plays in those games, the 13 turnovers they committed in those 4 games, referring to the Broncos, Bears, Bengals, and Lions, goes way down, and instead of this team sitting at a measly 7-9 through 16 games, they are at minimum 10-6 with a very real chance to knock off a team in the wildcard round and go from there. There is a very real chance if Kirk Cousins doesn't go down, this team wins back-to-back division titles. No matter how you slice it, the defense still needs work, personnel-wise, as I do believe in Brian Flores and everything he has done in 2023, but a lot of the players are replaceable on the defense. The temptation to trade Justin Jefferson is certainly there, as he would receive arguably the biggest haul any non-quarterback in the entire league would receive, maybe aside from Micah Parsons due to their youth, but this also sets a bad precedent for the franchise that basically says, hey, great job, you can sell jerseys, win an offensive player of the year for us, but when it's time for us to pay, we're going to ship you out and wish you the best. And that's not the precedent you want to set as a franchise, especially when you traded for a guy on another team in TJ Hockenson and paid him and have yet to pay Justin Jefferson. Pay JJ, extend Kirk, and draft a future replacement for Kirk. That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 36% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the growth of the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.